You are alone. No phone, no map, no signal. The sun just went behind a cloud, and every single tree around you looks exactly the same. Most people in that situation, they panic, they spiral, they die. But a frontiersman, he just looked around and knew exactly where he was going. These men, the Lewis and Clark types, the mountain men, the scouts, were traveling thousands of miles through completely unknown territory. No satellites, no apps, not even a decent road, and yet they made it. Not just survived, they thrived. Today I'm breaking down the 10 navigation tricks they actually used. And I'm telling you right now, by the time you get to number 1 on this list, you're going to want to go outside and try it. Some of these are dead simple. Some of them are going to blow your mind. But all of them have basically been forgotten, and that's a problem. Let's get into it. Trick number 10, reading the bark of trees. Okay, so you've probably heard the saying, moss grows on the north side of trees. And honestly, most people write that off as a myth. But here's the thing, it's not a myth. It's just not a rule. It's a clue. In the northern hemisphere, the north-facing side of a tree gets less direct sunlight, so it stays damper, and moss loves damp. Frontiersmen weren't looking at one tree, they were looking at 20 trees and finding the pattern. They were reading the landscape like a sentence. Also, and this one's underrated, the bark on the south side of a tree is often thicker and rougher because it's been baked by the sun over years. That texture tells a story. You just have to slow down enough to read it. Trick number 9, the stick and shadow method. This one goes back to before frontiersmen. We're talking ancient civilizations here. But mountain men absolutely used it. You push a stick into the ground, mark where the tip of the shadow falls. Wait 15 minutes, mark it again. Draw a line between those two marks. That line runs almost perfectly east to west. Perpendicular to it, north-south. Boom. You've just made a compass out of a stick and some dirt. It's so simple it almost feels like cheating, but it works. And in a survival situation, simple and reliable beats complicated every single time. Trick number 8, using rivers as roads. Frontiersmen didn't fight the land, they read it, and rivers were their highways. Here's what most people miss. Rivers always flow toward civilization, or at least toward lower ground, which is where settlements tend to form. If you're lost, find moving water and follow it downstream, every time. But the more advanced skill, reading where rivers meet. Confluences, spots where two rivers join, were like the GPS waypoints of the frontier. Frontiersmen memorized them, named them, navigated by them. Lewis and Clark's journals are basically a connect the dots of river confluences all the way to the Pacific. All right, look, we're only 3 tricks in, and I want to make sure you're sticking around because the ones coming up, numbers 5, 3, and especially number 1, those are the ones that genuinely stunned me when I went down this rabbit hole. Number 1 in particular is something that frontiersmen could do in complete darkness, in the middle of winter, with their eyes half shut, and once you hear it, you'll never look at the night sky the same way again. Keep watching. Trick number 7, wind patterns and prevailing winds. In North America, the prevailing winds generally blow from the west. Frontiersmen knew this cold, so when they were in open country with 0 landmarks, they'd simply figure out which way the wind was coming from and use that as a rough west indicator. But here's where it gets clever. They also noticed how animals responded to wind. Deer, elk, bison, they almost always graze facing into the wind so they can smell predators coming. Frontiersmen used animal behavior as a living compass. That's a level of environmental awareness most of us have completely lost. Trick number 6, star clocks. You know Polaris, the North Star. Most people do. But here's what most people don't know. The stars around it rotate like a clock, and frontiersmen learned to read that clock. Specifically, they used the 2 outer stars of the Big Dipper, called the pointer stars, as a clock hand. Those stars rotate around Polaris every 24 hours. Once you know where they sit at a specific time of year, you can estimate the time of night to within about 30 minutes. Time equals direction. If you know what time it is, you know where east is at sunrise. These guys were walking around with a clock and a compass in the sky above them every night. Trick number 5, memorizing landmarks backwards. This one is a mental skill, and it's one that almost nobody practices anymore. Frontiersmen were trained, or trained themselves, to constantly look backwards as they walked. Why? Because the landscape looks completely different from the other direction. A mountain that's on your left going out will be on your right coming back, but it'll also look different. Different angle, different shadow, different profile. If you only ever look forward, you'll be completely lost on the return trip. So they'd stop every mile or so, turn around, and mentally photograph what the trail looked like from that direction. It sounds tedious, but it saved lives. It's basically the original version of dropping pins on Google Maps, except the pin was in their brain. Trick number 4, reading animal trails. Animals aren't random. They're incredibly efficient. Game trails, those narrow paths worn into the ground by deer, elk, and other animals, almost always lead somewhere useful. Water, a clearing, a valley passed through a mountain range. Frontiersmen learned to follow game trails because animals had already done the hard work of finding the most efficient routes through difficult terrain, and they were careful to understand which animals made which trails. A wide trail pressed deep into the earth. Bison, that leads to open grazing land. A narrow, winding trail, deer heading to water. The land was covered in signposts. You just had to know the language. Trick number 3. The North Star isn't always easy to find. Here's something navigation guides don't always tell you. On a partially cloudy night, finding Polaris isn't as easy as it sounds. The sky is huge. Frontiersmen had a system. They learned multiple constellations that point toward the North Star, not just the Big Dipper. Cassiopeia, for instance, is on the opposite side of Polaris from the Big Dipper. So on nights when one constellation was obscured, they used the other. They triangulated using the relationship between multiple star groups, not just one. That redundancy is what separated someone who'd studied navigation from someone who'd just read about it once. Trick number 2, terrain association, not route memorization. Here's a mindset shift that modern people almost never make. We memorize routes. Frontiersmen memorize terrain. There's a massive difference. Memorizing a route means turn left at the Big Oak, cross the creek, go straight for 2 miles. That works until the oak gets struck by lightning or the creek floods, or you come at it from a different direction. Terrain association means understanding the shape of the land itself. That ridge runs north to south. This valley drains to the southeast. There's always high ground to the west. When you navigate by shape, not by sequence, you can never truly be lost, because the shape of the earth doesn't change. This is how frontiersmen could take a completely new route and still know exactly where they were the entire time. Trick number 1, reading the stars with your hand. This is the one. This is what I promised you at the 3-minute mark, and it delivers. Hold your hand out at arm's length toward the horizon. Each finger, held horizontally, equals roughly 15 minutes of time before the sun or a star sets, or about 2 degrees of arc across the sky. Frontiersmen used this to calculate how long they had before dark. 4 fingers between the sun and the horizon. About an hour of light left. Plan accordingly. But more than that, they used the same hand measurement to calculate their latitude. The angle between Polaris and the horizon, measured in hand widths, gives you a rough estimate of how far north you are. 14 hand widths in a bit. You're at roughly 45 degrees north latitude. Your hand. That's the instrument, the thing you were born with, calibrated by the sky. That's what gets me about all of these tricks. There's no technology involved, just attention, observation, patience. These men built a relationship with the natural world that most of us have completely severed. And honestly, I think that's worth thinking about. 10 tricks, 0 technology, just human intelligence applied to the actual world. If you want to go deeper on any of these, especially the star navigation stuff, drop a comment below and I'll do a full dedicated video. And if you learned something today, share this with someone who thinks they could survive in the wild, because chances are they couldn't. Not yet. Hope to see you in the next one.